Hey everyone, this is Robert, and thank you so much for tuning in to Station Square once again. And I have my returning guest that is with me. We're doing another off-camera interview, but it's all good because you'll get to hear our crisp, smooth voices just for the two for the price of one. So thank you so much, Chuck McKibben, for joining me once again on Station Square. It's been
It
quite some time since I
it's
last
my honor
talked.
to be invited back. Thank you, Robert. Thanks.
Anytime, man. So, I guess to really start this off, how would you say that the last couple of years have been since we last spoke? Like, anything that you want to share, you want to promote, or just get the self-promo stuff just right at on the very top of this? I'm usually
Well,
saving for the end, but let's talk about what exciting stuff that you've kind of been
well,
partaking in.
I will establish for those who did not hear the first podcast that a reason why people want to talk to me is because I had the great pleasure of working for Mel Blanc in Hollywood at his personal recording studio, his audio production company, Mel Blanc Audio Media. This is a literally unknown part of Mel's life where he wasn't uh, really under contract anymore with Warner Brothers, wasn't doing any more cartoons, not even with Hanna-Barbera. So I was there in 72 as a 25-year-old boy and had an 8-year background in radio, which is the only qualification I had. So my story has been out as a book. Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny, and me, dot, 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 and me. And the subtitle is Inside the Studio with Hollywood's Man of a Thousand Voices. And I have been selling that book on Amazon and so forth for the past 8 years. Now we're up to speed with why the heck I'm here. Because I am basically a nobody, except I had a wonderful adventure. And then after that, I became a producer and director in New York City for 30 years. I was a writer, producer, director, and my first love, a voice talent. And so I'm an audio guy at heart. And when you said our two nice, clear sounding microphones, I'm thrilled that that's the case. Um, for, for your update, I have been quietly enjoying my semi-retirement here in New Jersey, where I live in a lovely suburban neighborhood within the area of New York City. We're included in the metro area here. So I hear all the New York City radio and TV stations and all that. Uh, I teach a couple of times a week still. I started teaching in the 1980s as I had been in front of microphones for a long time, even by then. And I loved teaching because it got me outside of myself. For me to teach meant I'm not thinking about me and my career and how can I make myself greater and all that. Suddenly I was concerned about other people. And that was refreshing. Teaching, that's an honorable profession. Mel Blanc did it, and that's a part of my story. And he taught for a year, and I was with his school for that entire year. So that's a part of my story that's in my book. And by the way, I do want to announce right away to get this off to a good start. My audiobook will soon, as soon as I finish updating it, will be put onto YouTube. I'm sorry, not Facebook. YouTube. I'll have messages about it on Facebook, but it will be posted for free for listening on YouTube. And it will probably be in two segments, about 30 chapters altogether. A lot of stuff people never knew about Mel Blanc. And I want everybody to know that it will be out there. So I'll be posting some more information about that. And I'll let you know too. So, I have, as a semi-retired person, my days are quiet now. All my great adventures are over. At 78, I'm not going places. I don't take trips. My wife doesn't want to take any trips either. In my radio days, I roamed all over America in radio as a DJ, you know, and I was not a fabulous DJ. I never got to the status of making $100,000 a year in New York on WABC, which was my goal. When it was Music Radio 77, it was the biggest radio station in the world as far as anybody knew, and it was #1 in the Big Apple in New York City. So that was my goal. later it broadened into, well, when I'm 40, am I going to be a DJ playing rock and roll records? And I decided to take a turn in my career to being more an audio guy. I went to Hollywood, 2,000-mile trip from Dayton, Ohio to Hollywood without a job waiting for me. That's part of the story. And in the era before anything digital. So there was no cell phone service on that 2,000-mile trip. No GPS to tell me I was on the wrong road. Nothing. Nothing. If my car broke down, I'd have to thumb a ride and get somebody to pick me up and take me to the nearest town where they had a tow truck to come back for the car. And everything I owned was in the car. So it probably would have been stripped by the time I got back. It was a crazy adventure, Robert. It was insane. And I can't imagine, with the grown up mind that I have now, ever having had the courage to do it. But if I had thought about it further, I would have said, this is nuts. I better stay in Dayton, Ohio and do what I want to do. But you know what? You can't stay in your comfort zone and change your life. If anybody hears any words that I say today, if somebody is struggling with the direction their life is going in, don't do tomorrow what you did today. That doesn't work, obviously. I had to do something radically different. I had to hop in my car, travel 2,000 miles to go after the jobs that don't exist in Dayton, Ohio, like working for the world's greatest voice artist, Mel Blanc. That couldn't happen in Dayton or Cincinnati or Columbus. So basically, that bit of advice I give to everybody right up front. Do something different tomorrow if you're not happy with your today, because tomorrow will be exactly the same, a repeat. Steve Harvey puts it that way too, but he's got a different way of saying it. He says you got to jump. You have to make a jump in your life from where you are now to where you want to be. Give it a try. You can fail and learn from the failure and try again, as long as you're young. I couldn't do it at my age now, but for anybody listening who's a young person sort of drifting through life and not knowing where should I go next, well, pick a direction and then go after it with all your heart and soul. And I've said to you, Robert, that I felt because I was so sincere in my desire that my footsteps were guided by perhaps a higher power because some amazing things happened along the way. And folks, you'll read about it if you just check online on YouTube for Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny, ... and me, Chuck McKibben. It'll be there soon. It'll be there hopefully within the next month. So nothing really new and exciting going on my side. I gotta say, I'm just enjoying a comfortable retirement in good health. Uh, Knock on wood, I do take extremely good care of my health. And that's my other bit of advice for everybody. You may feel fine now eating junk food. Stop it. You'll feel terrible when you're 60. Get away from those chips, those, French fries, the sodas. Get rid of the junk food in your life and eat a healthy diet, or you'll regret it when you're 60, 70. 70 especially is a pivotal year. You change at 70. I did. 8 years ago, I was 70. I can't believe when I say that I'm less than 2 years away from 80. Do I sound healthy? What do you think, Robert?
Absolutely.
Well, then there you go. I got my 30-year-old voice still, and it's because I've taken care of my health. By the way, I'm not on any meds at all at age 78. No meds, none. The doctor can't make money off of me. So you had some questions for me besides that. I'm doing fine in my retirement, but you had some questions for me. You on those?
Oh, yes, I do. Which the first question, since you brought up Mel, what was some of the because you've already talked about some of your favorite like experiences and stuff like that, but what
Oh
would you say
yeah.
was something that really kind of was like the one a really good memory of Mel that you just still look back and smile at
Well, as I
and
remember,
you
you
just
love radio as I have loved radio all my life.
yeah.
I was attracted to it at age 6. I wanted to be a DJ because in my hometown of Dayton, I figured the one way I could hope to become an announcer was to have a radio show and play top 40 records, which I inevitably did, by the way. And that was a That was thrill number one in my career. Thrill number two, I've got three or four major posts along the way in my journey through life. Number one, I got on the number one top 40 radio station in my hometown, and every kid in town knew I was on the air, and that was um, be, before I was out of my teens. Okay, so that was the first thrill. I loved radio. I loved being a DJ, but that couldn't last a lifetime. And now, of course, DJs don't have the significance that they once had. So the next big adventure, I got to say, is making the trip to California. And through a miraculous circumstance of a friend, I got to be introduced to Mel Blanc and got hired by him within 3 minutes of meeting Mel and his son. That was in 1972. And immediately upon doing that, I knew my life has now changed. I can now have worked for Mel Blanc in Hollywood on my resume. And I could drop all the stupid radio stations I'd worked at. Who cared that I was in Kentucky and Michigan and everywhere else on 1,000-watt radio stations? Who cared, you know? And then my best memory, I've thought a lot about this. I worked with major Hollywood stars at Mel's. I worked with real celebrities, Kirk Douglas, Spartacus, people like that, Vincent Price, and Jack Benny, the most popular comic on radio and TV for about 40 years. The first part of his career being the biggest comic on radio, and then still being in the number two spot or three at the lowest throughout a decade or two of TV. So I'm working with Jack Benny. I'm working with great old time stars. And then what was my favorite? Well, I'm a radio guy. So I got to hang out with and become close friends with a real hero to me, a guy who was the number one disc jockey in his kind of music in Los Angeles, Gary Owens. From Laugh-In, the announcer with the hand over the ear. Gary Owens was, ask anybody, the very sweetest human being to ever live on planet Earth. The nicest, kindest, dearest human being I have ever met in my life. And I've met some nice people. But Gary was a part of my life because I visited his station, KMPC, Los Angeles, just about every week at the least, sometimes twice a week. And I got to know him as a personal friend. Well, he was the dearest friend I ever had, invited me right into the studio, would tell his audience, well, everyone, here on the Gary Owens Show, we've got Chuck McKibben in the studio, like I was somebody. I was an audio engineer. I was not a celebrity. But, he would make you feel like $1 million. Gary Owens. Look him up if you've never heard of him. He's not the Gary Owen, who is a current comic. Gary Owens with an S at the end. A sweetheart, the dearest man who was done in by severe type 1 diabetes. And that was crushing. I cried the day that I read of his death. And it was very sad. But working with him is a joy. He was everybody I had hoped to be. As a radio disc jockey, he was a huge success. And of course, the crowd that loves animation voices, well, he was Powdered Toast Man. He was Super Ghost or something like that. I don't remember all the things because I don't really follow that, but he was a big comic voice too. Whenever they needed somebody with a big stentorian voice, like, yes, I'm here to save the day. He was that voice. He had the biggest voice I'd ever heard in my life. So, yeah, I got to work with stars, but those were one-day affairs. Kirk Douglas was there twice, and he was a dear sweetheart of a man. Here I'm working with Spartacus, and he's mild. He's down to earth. Not he doesn't act like a star. He says, "Hey kid, when was the last time you saw me in anything?" I said, "Oh, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Disney. You were great as Ned Land, this rough and tough sailor fighting the octopus, the squid, the giant squid." He said, "Yeah, 1955, the money's gone. They don't pay me for that." He said that was a theatrical movie, and my contract never included TV. So when you saw that, I made $0. Wow. And he said, the parts aren't there for me anymore. I'm a middle-aged man. I don't look like a young, hunky guy anymore. And I don't get the roles that I want to take. Wow. Imagine a superstar, a real genuine superstar. He got a lifetime Academy Award for his body of work. Imagine him being that humble to a kid who's just his recording engineer. But there I was, one-on-one with him. Noel Blanc was in the adjoining office just listening in. I'm so proud to say, and I'm bragging now, that Noel would let me work with these big stars very often on my own. He didn't necessarily sit in because he was a hands-off director. These people knew their own voices. They knew what they should sound like. They didn't really need direction. We never hired people who did. And so Noel would just say, hey, you guys carry on. I'll be listening. And I'd be there with a Vincent Price, Rod Serling, people like that. It just blew my mind that I was so allowed to be trusted like that. I was honored. That was a thrill. So let's see. By the time I left Los Angeles, there was one more huge thrill in my life, and that was becoming the promo voice announcer for Time Warner Home Theater in New York City. This was a twice a month job where I would go in and record movie trailers. Yeah, I did movie trailers, which was pretty exciting and very lucrative. And it was just in addition to my full-time job of being a producer and director. So I would just take an afternoon off and go record. Well, I must have done 1,000 different trailers in 10 years. I was the voice of Time Warner Home Movies for the entire decade of the 90s. Made a ton of money doing that. But beyond that, it's a thrill. Here's what I wanted to say, and I've been thinking hard about this. I'm not bragging. These are the major achievements of my career, but I know that nobody gives a damn. Not really. We don't go around saying, gee, I hope Chuck McKibben is getting a good job. Nobody was saying that, except my wife. These achievements along the way, I won a bunch of awards in advertising. They don't mean a thing now. You know what matters? How did you live your life? Did you spread love and compassion in the course of your travels? Were you kind to other people? There's a lot of unkindness in America right now, a lot of lack of compassion right now. I won't go further into saying that, but there's too much of it right now, this minute, in 2025. So I'm proud to say that my adventure in Hollywood, in my book, I talk about this. It reunited a family that I had been there, that the man who introduced me to Mel Blanc had a rather bad relationship with his grandchildren, his two male grandchildren. When they read about my praise of this man, Rod Tebow, online, it reunited that family. His grandchildren were now proud of their grandfather because I had said what a wonderful man and important member of the Hollywood community he had been. So what I found out is the awards mean nothing. I couldn't give them away for $1 today. They have my name on it. I've got statues from, the Hollywood Radio TV Society and the Telly Awards and all. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not even to me. Because those are just ways you improve your career chances. That's all. They're marketing tools. Oh, look at me. Hire me because I've won these awards. But you know what happens in advertising when you make commercials for a living? They don't say, gee, I hope our commercial, Chuck, that you're making for my company will get a lot of awards. The sponsors don't care about that. They want to make sales. Your awards as a broadcaster, as a voice artist, only matter because they helped you get your next job. But when you get the next job, they're not saying, gee, we hope we get an award too. No, awards mean nothing to these people. They're marketing tools. And by the way, they're all paid for by the ad agency. You don't compete unless you pay them to compete. So there was a fee for any award that I won that somebody above me paid. Oh, we want to get an award for this so we can put it on display in our ad agencies, uh, you know, the reception room. We need to have a bunch of statues in the reception room saying that we're brilliant, and that we have geniuses working for us. That's all it meant. It didn't matter. And so I say to people who are much younger, spend your life building friendships and spreading love and care and compassion. You will be glad you did it in the end. It will pay rewards to you later, and you'll feel good about yourself, and you'll feel that you earned a place on this rock spinning through space. Because we're all insignificant to each other until we do something for each other. Nobody is going around right now today thinking, boy, oh boy, I sure hope Chuck is happy in his retirement and doing well. No, they're not thinking about me. I have to be honest about that. My closest friends do not have me on their minds 24/7. They really don't. You know, retirement is a quiet time. Be prepared for that. You won't be having adventures in retirement. You're too old. Um, but I've had such a great life that I've been able to write about it and find an audience for that. That's a huge reward. To know that I lived an adventure that people want to hear about is just delightful to me. It's like, yeah, and I got to do it. Isn't that swell? You just go for the achievements that you want to achieve. Yes, don't sit on your rear end and say the world owes me a living. But on the other hand, when you have a great achievement, keep it in perspective. Uh, this helped me in my career. Great. That's nice, but it doesn't make me a better person. None of my awards for good advertising made me a better person in any way. That was up to me. And I made mistakes along the way. I didn't adequately thank people who had helped me in my climb to the top, in New York City. There are people that I wish I could find now who gave me big boosts and said, "Hey, Chuck, I want to help you out." And they got nothing out of it. And at the time, I took it for granted too much. Didn't thank them enough. So I do have that regret. I needed to be kinder. Maybe we all do. I don't know. But it's just, it's important. That's all I want to get across. Let's see. You had another question for me, a really good one,
Yeah,
or two.
I think you kind of answered two questions that I had, which
Okay.
was like, what was something that you cherish so deeply about being in voiceover for all this
Yeah.
time? And
Yeah.
I think it's something that pretty sure that you've already just said, like, what is
Yeah.
something that's been keeping you positive throughout the year? So I think you kind of answered like at least the
Well,
third question, but for number two, yeah,
yeah.
let's hear it.
My wife is my joy today. If the whole world goes to hell in a handbasket, as long as I have my wonderful wife, uh, I'm I'm good. You know, when you marry, if you are a young person who's unmarried right now hearing this, marry your best friend who you would have as your best roommate ever. Remember that the passion, the lust fades after a while between man and woman. The lust will fade, promise. Um, but what remains is, do I like this person that I sleep with? Am I happy when she holds me at night and says, I love you, Charles, which is the only person who gets to call me that. The idea that if you marry somebody because they're really hot and they're beautiful, looks fade, looks fade. Men get old and gray. Men get tired. What I'm saying is marry your best friend. I did. I did. I waited a long time. I didn't get married till 1999. And I partied like it was 1999 because I had found my soulmate. And that mattered. And that's why we're still together now with no problem. And I care about her. She cares about me. What else do I need in this life but somebody who cares about me? I like to make friends. I have friends online. I don't get to go out much. I have a rollator that I get around on because I'm a bit unsteady on my feet. I'm a little shaky on my feet and I don't trust them. I always had bad legs. So I use a little rolling thingy, not because I'm disabled in any sense, but because I just don't want to fall on the concrete and break a hip. Hey, you got to worry about that stuff at my age. So, yeah, my life is good. My life is good because I can look back on it and say, when I did advertising for people, I helped them make money and bring home the bacon. Here's something I've never said this in public before. When I would work for Lexus of Smithtown in Smithtown, Long Island, I wasn't thinking about the owner or the cars. I was thinking about that sales rep standing up in the showroom when somebody walks in, hoping and praying that he's going to sell a car today because he's got a quota to meet. Well, I got that customer in the door through my commercial, but I can't sell the car through the commercial. So my pride in doing advertising was in helping somebody earn a living, some sales rep who needs a customer to come to his door and say, I heard about that new Lexus model on TV last night. I'd like to take it for a test drive. When I kept that in mind, I'm working for that sales rep who wants to take his kids to Disneyland or Disney World this year. He wants to have a nice home for them to grow up in. He wants to have a good, steady paycheck and lives entirely on his sales. There's no salary. I want him to do well, and my job is to bring customers to the door. That's a noble profession if it's for a good client. If it's for an honest client, which they were a wonderful client for 15 years. 15 years, I sold very expensive Lexus automobiles month after month after month for 15 years. And I'm proud of that. And I'm pleased about that. I can rest with that. I can say this was helping other people eat, put food on the table and a roof over their head. This is what it really boils down to. If you make money for somebody who's a hardworking person, not the boss, not the owner, but a hardworking person trying to make a living in this difficult world, then you've done good. Of course, if you work for the wrong clients who are evil and ripping people off, refuse to do that. The one of the more honorable people I ever met was Casey Kasem. When I worked with him as the host of American Top 40, he came in to do 42 voice tracks for Dairy Queen. But he was a vegan, and he had turned down their request that he, in the voice of Shaggy, do commercials for hamburgers for Dairy Queen. He said, no, I don't eat meat, and I don't want to tell anybody to eat meat, not even as a cartoon character. And he passed up a ton of money and almost got fired from Scooby-Doo because of that stand. Well, that's a very honorable man. And by the way, those rants that you hear him doing, he had a terrible partner in American Top 40. I won't mention his name. He may still be living. But his partner in American Top 40 was a real difficult man to work with and constantly under Casey's skin. So when you hear him talk about the dead dog dedication and ranting with four-letter words, it's because this guy was a constant thorn in his side, not because it just happened that one day. When Casey did those 42 commercials with us, he was a sweetheart. He was the kindest, sweetest man. He was as nice as could be and concerned about whether he would work the next day. Well, he made $500,000 that day at my microphone. $500,000. By the time the residuals came in, Mel Blanc figured them out. What will he make in the next year from the U.S. and Canada and 42 commercials running in both countries? And it came to something like residuals of $500,000. So he made $500,000 in one afternoon. But he was constantly calling his agent. Is it still lined up for tomorrow? The gig is still on, right? Right? He was nervous about working tomorrow. Damn, I'd hate to have to live that way. Fortunately, I got lucky. When I was in my voiceover career, I also had a full-time job that had the flexibility that I could go on assignments. Oh, the one other milestone, I forgot this one, was in 1987 when I got hired through my agent to be the voice of my first Sony. It's online everywhere. If you look at on YouTube, if you look up my first Sony, you'll hear me in 1987 saying, now Sony makes small products for small people. I did 7 seconds and bought a car with the money because voiceover was very good back in those days. The heydays of voiceover were in the 1980s by far. So here's the deal. I could now be heard by my parents and friends back in Ohio on network TV specials at the holiday time. You know, Santa Claus is coming to town and the Grinch who stole Christmas and all that. They're hearing my voice selling Sony children's electronics back in Dayton. And now my family knows I made it. My mom and dad must have been so proud. And they told me so. Son, we heard you last night watching TV on network TV on a big, big holiday special. Well, you know, I showed them that I was not a screw up, that I was not a failed disc jockey now selling used cars in Dayton, that I had made it in big time show business. I'm not bragging. I'm saying this was my life's goal and I achieved it because I wanted it. And believe me, there were lean times. There were times when it was difficult to pursue it. And when I thought maybe I should give this dream up, but I never did. I never did. I said, I'll get through this. I'll keep going and I'll survive. And so now I'm to a very comfortable retirement where I don't worry about doing anything except what would you call it? Vanity projects. Right now, I've been recording for Camp Anderson in Pennsylvania for a $100,000 fundraiser. And I hope they make the money. And I hope that my voice helps them make that money to raise money for this. Basically, it's a Boy Scout camp and for the enjoyment of other people. Well, that's where the pleasure comes in being a voice artist. If you're doing some good for somebody somewhere, whether it's a commercial or in this case, more of a public service announcement. And believe me, I'm not making dough on this. I'm not getting rich off of this. I don't need to. I'm well set. But it's a pleasure to help people. If you've got a gift that's been given to you, a talent that you can put to use for good, you feel good about yourself at the end of the day. You know, I didn't rob people of their life savings today. I got paid, but I got paid for doing some good. And that's a wonderful feeling. It can't be beat. Also, the feeling that you were chosen above all the other people who wanted that same job. Up.
Alrighty, so you were saying? Yellow? Oh, shoot, what just happened?
You hear me, Robert?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good, good.
Good. Yeah, you were just telling about, the other big milestone or something
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
life. Yeah, you were just
yeah.
talking about, yeah, you were just saying, I think it was something about like, doing audiobook or doing a series of some sort. And yeah,
No, it
of
wasn't
course.
audiobooks. It was actually Time Warner Home
Time Warner,
Theater
yeah, yeah.
doing trailers for Time Warner, selling movies at $3.95 per hit movie to New Yorkers throughout the five boroughs of New York, all of whom were on Time Warner Home Theater, I guess. Well, they had to pay to be there, you know. Anyway, I'll let you lead off here, going into this segment.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you were just kind of talking about some of the work that you were doing and living such a great life and
Yeah,
just getting to meet a lot of so many like Hollywood stars and everybody.
yeah.
And I think you were telling some stories about some of the voice actors that were, a part of like Hanna-Barbera and so on and so forth. Because I remember you were telling stories about Paul Frees, Dawes
Oh
Butler,
yes,
Don
oh
Casey
yes.
Kasem, and so many other folks. So I think my next question pertaining to that was because I know you've worked with Mel Blanc you were really close with them, but
Yes.
anybody else that you want to say, like any other voice actor stories, like any memorable experiences of working with them, and what are some of the positive takeaways that you got from knowing all of these people all throughout your journey and whatnot?
We we
Yeah.
had a we had a core group of talents who got called back again and again without needing to audition every time. Lenny Weinrib was one of those people who was a joy to have in the studio. He was the writer and a performer on H&R Puff and stuff. Sid and Marty Krofft. It was not a big hit. It didn't last a long time, but that's probably his greatest claim to fame. But he was the man who Mel and Noel both thought was the funniest guy at the microphone that they had ever hired. And he was a riot. He was joined, usually in a guy-gal situation, with a lady named Joni Gerber. And Joni was a sweetheart. Joni was a ray of sunshine. When she walked in the room, you knew you were going to have a happy day. And so these two people, not big stars at all, but they were the stars of the Mel Blanc studio. They did so many male female reads together, and Joni could be any female character you needed. You know, it didn't matter calling her in for the job. Need a female voice? Bring in Joni. She'll find the right voice for the character. Same was true with Lenny. Um, they did a package called Super Fun at the Mel Blanc studio before I got there. Joni and he were both on it a lot. And I've put some super fun examples in my audiobook for people to hear so that when they go and hear my new revised audiobook on online, they're going to hear samples of these two wonderful performers. So there are people who are not famous who become your favorites. And when asked, who's the best voice talent other than you, Mel? He said, Lenny Weinrib. Lenny Weinrib. I said, well, what about Paul Frees, who had been there once with us, although they were the worst of antagonists against each other. Frees came in character, as I call him the Baron. He might have called himself something else, but let's say for a working purpose. He came in a top hat, a silk top hat, a silvery cane, uh, a cape. He was dressed like European royalty, in other words. And he walked in character into the reception room. Please to tell Mr. Blank that the Baron is here. What? You could hear his voice throughout the whole building. And he stayed in that character until they got into a match of, top this insult. There's one of them, and I don't really remember who. One of them flubbed a line in the commercial they were working on together. One of them dropped the line. The other attacked the other guy verbally with funny stuff, with insulting but hilarious jokes. And it went on like that, on and on and on. Because these two guys didn't like each other even. They didn't admire each other, although grudgingly, Mel said, yeah, you got to give the guy props. He's been the Pillsbury Doughboy, um, Burgermeister Meisterburger, whatever. He's been 200, 300 great characters. Toucan Sam, he's all these characters. So you got to give him some credit. He was the greatest rival to Mel. Mel didn't worry at all about Dawes Butler, a sweetheart, but he said all his voices sound like they're Southern, which kind of was true, actually. And a quick draw McGraw, howdy to you too, you know. Um, so I would say that this session, this one session with Paul Frees for Paul Parrott Children's Shoes, uh, I don't remember finishing the commercial really because they got into such a verbal battle. But Noel said, "Keep the tape recorder going. Keep till we run out of tape, then put a fresh reel on." Because as long as these guys were insulting each other in character, it was hilarious. And we were rolling on the floor. We didn't care. We'll get it done. Paul Frees was an odd duck, though. I said after it was all over, why did he come in character? Why did he arrive at the studio in character? He says Paul Frees finds it dull to just be Paul every day. He likes to go into character when he works. Really? Okay. Kind of a strange fella and not well liked, according to them. But, takes all types. But it was a hilarious session. Most of the others, too, had some kind of situation in which It was enough of a story that it's in my book. I picked out only the best sessions. There were lots of celebrity uh, readers at my microphone, but they're not big stars, and so I don't really cover them. But people whose faces you might remember from TV if you watched it in the 60s or the 70s, people who you'd seen on TV or in movies, but they weren't big names. So, frankly, their sessions were pretty routine and not really worth including. But I've got these half dozen great sessions that I was a part of where I was at the controls. And, what an experience. You had to work with movie stars, and there they are at your microphone. You're at the volume controls and the tape recorder, and you're working entirely on tape. And you're there with, Spartacus in the other room, except he's not in character. And he's this really nice guy. You'd think he's just a good neighbor to talk to him. Hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a movie star. So it was underwhelming at the same time that it was overwhelming. When Rod Serling walked in the room, talk about underwhelming. The first words out of his mouth after, well, hi, Chuck, how are you? It's nice to meet you, were, by the way, can you do anything to fix my voice? Imagine Rod Serling with that very distinctive voice asking if I could fix it. He hated it because he was a writer. He had won 5 Emmys for his writing, nothing for his voice work. He was not a voice artist, but he was now making money only as a voice artist because people considered him too difficult to work with as a writer. You cause too many problems with your socialist attitude, and we got to solve all the world's problems through the Twilight Zone. Yeah, because he wanted to attack the evils of, the evils in the world. But if they were about human beings, they didn't want to tick off the advertisers. Well, if we talk about race in one of your in one of your episodes, if it's got to do with race and black versus white, they won't run it in the Deep South. We'll be off the air in the Deep South. So he had to make them space aliens. That's the real reason why so often it turned into a spook show with aliens instead of a social commentary. So now he's making money as a voice artist and is hired for that very distinctive voice on a commercial. It was slumming for Rod Serling, a job that other voice actors would say, "Give me that job, please. I want it." For him, he's slumming. So, it was interesting to find out how people felt about doing this work. How does a movie star feel doing radio commercials? Well, any legitimate job is work. You take it, unless you object to what's being sold. And principled voiceover talents do that when it's necessary. I've turned down lucrative jobs to sell fur, for instance, because I'm an animal lover. I'm like Bob Barker. I could no more tell people to go out and buy a fur coat than to tell them to go jump in a lake. That's not me, and I couldn't do that. It was an $8,000 job that I passed up, seriously. When I was a freelancer, and I was a freelancer for a long time. I've been freelancing all of my life since 1994. I went freelance, and I never worked for a single boss after that. I'd always written, produced, directed, voiced for individuals as a freelancer. Any more questions there, Robert?
Yes, indeedy. Yes, indeed. So, you were just talking about a lot of these stories, but
Yeah,
I kind of wanted to know what would you say was kind of like the one, like, because you were talking about milestones and,
yeah,
just
yeah.
a lot of this stuff that you were just, sharing with us all throughout this interview. But what would you say was something that, if you were to look back and you really think to yourself, wow, this is why I just really love doing just
Yeah.
all of this. Like, what would you, yeah, if you were to also talk about some of those as well, like the moments where
Sure.
you just go back and you, just really think to yourself, man, I can't
I
believe
was there.
yeah,
Yeah. I can't believe I
Seriously.
was there.
Yeah.
Well, I got one that just occurred to me about a week ago. I was watching a documentary about the great producer Cecil B. DeMille, who made his masterpiece was his finest and final film, The Ten Commandments, in the 1950s. And it dawned on me that I had worked with a man who had been directed by Cecil B. DeMille in the biggest motion picture that DeMille, who basically was the founder of Hollywood in many ways, the real man who got Hollywood off the ground, that I had worked with an actor who was in the Ten Commandments, which I had seen as a child at a big theater, you know? It's like, why didn't I ask him about that? Why didn't I say to him, I knew he had been in it. Why, as a 25-year-old, did I miss the opportunity to say, I saw you in the Ten Commandments, which runs every year on ABC as a classic film at Easter time. I saw you in that when I was, what, 12? I cannot believe I'm in the same room with the man who played the master builder, Baca. You know, I should have said that. But I'm a twerp. I'm 25 years old. I'm a child. I'm a pup. You know, I don't have sophistication at that age. I think I do now, I think. But yeah, that's one of those where, damn, why didn't I ask Kirk Douglas what was it like playing Spartacus? Holy cow. Or, Vincent Price. Well, I did ask, what was it like making all those Edgar Allan Poe movies? And here's his answer. It was a free trip to Europe. We shot a lot of them in England. And every time I was there, it was like a paid vacation, he said. I love fine wine, fine art, fine food. And I got lots of that at their expense when I made the Edgar Allan Poe movies for American International. He said it was on their dime. I'm overseas thanks to them. So, yeah, he thought it was a lark. He thought it was a lark. I got to ask them questions like that. There's always downtime during a session with these people when they're just themselves. What I will share with people is that you feel you're a coworker and it would be inappropriate to treat them like you're a fan. So I didn't ask for autographs. That's gauche. That's tacky. I did not ask for that. And I should have. I had the opportunity. I could have said, well, besides working with you, I really am a fan. But then you're a coworker. Do you ask your fellow workers at your job, can I get your autograph? You may be famous someday. So what it boiled down to was, we're here to get a job done. We're here to make a recording, and let's get to work. And if we chat along the way, I'd like to ask you something or another. But yeah, missed opportunities, so many of them. I do wish I could go and relive those times again at times because, first of all, the team at Mel Blanc Audio Media was the greatest bunch of people I'd ever worked with. No better staff ever than Bill Baldwin Jr. and what was his first name? Pat Bailey. We had just a wonderful crew there of creative types. And what we all had in our backgrounds, was we'd all been radio disc jockeys. Every person in a creative position at Mel Blanc, including Mel, had been a disc jockey. How about that? Mel was a disc jockey? Yes. At one of the radio stations where he worked in Oregon, his native Portland, he had a show where he had a lot of different bits that he did. And one of the bits on the show was to play some records. So Mel Blanc was actually a DJ in the 1930s, before the word had even been coined by Walter Winchell, who gave us the name disc jockey, by the way, a DJ. So, yeah, there are regrets that I have about what I didn't do because I was young, and young people are foolish and miss opportunities that they'll regret when they grow up and get smarter. But I was naive. I was a kid. I was wet behind the ears still, even after 8 years in radio. And I never had a better boss in radio than Mel and Noel. Sweethearts, both of them. Uh, I was throwing a birthday party when I turned 26. I was given a watch, a very fine watch, by Mel because I was occasionally late, and he was a punctuality freak. He said, "Here, this will help you be on time." But he gave me this really expensive watch instead of firing me. So, they were wonderful employers. They really were. And uh, I made the mistake of a lifetime by leaving there for more money, feeling, well, I've been there, done that with everybody at least twice at the Blank studio. I took a job for more money with a former partner of theirs, a guy named Harry O'Connor. And I thought, oh, this is a lateral move and a step up. He didn't keep his promises. Long story short, when I went to work for him, he did not give me the money that we had negotiated and left me in the lurch because I'd left my job. So that's in the book too about making the mistake of a lifetime and leaving prematurely when I could have stayed. There was no problem staying, but you do dumb things when you're 25. And that was the dumbest thing I probably ever did, honestly. I took the man at his word that he was going to pay me. He didn't. So what can you do? Um, yeah, there were lots of little highlights, little moments in time. I worked with the greatest voice artist on TV as a promo voice, Ernie Anderson. He was the voice of ABC television at that time, doing things like Saturday on the Love Boat. He was that guy. And oh my God, what a piece of work he was. Well, an outgoing actor who happened to have as deep a voice as he did, Ed Peck, was still there as Ernie walked into the room and started reading. And so when Ernie stepped out of the booth, he says, "Hey, buddy, I got a voice as deep as yours. You think you're something?" They challenged each other. Can you top this? Can you talk deeper than me? Oh my God. They both went on mic just to record the thing. I wish I had that. Ed Peck had a voice just as deep as Ernie's. And I don't know who the winner was, really. I mean, they were both really amazing voices. Those deep basso profundo voices. The kind that I wanted and didn't have. I'm a little Irish tenor, really, compared to guys like this. But yeah, we had the booming voiced announcers of that era. We had, oh, Barbara, who was it? Barbara on Get Smart. Barbara, who was his co-star with Don Adams? Well, I'll think of it after we talk. We had some females, but not many. Mostly it was male voice actors. It was a male-dominated business, quite frankly. And I don't know if I would have been hired if I'd been a female audio engineer. I don't know. I'd like to think I would have on my qualifications, but it was kind of a male-dominated business at the time, to be perfectly honest about it. And if you wanted to be a voice artist on network TV, well, that it's a boys' club. That's what I can say about that. Yeah, the moments that I spent in Hollywood were delightful, except I didn't like Los Angeles at all. I loved the work. I couldn't have been happier with my job, but I disliked LA. The smog, the earthquakes, the forest fires, all that stuff got to me. And I said, I really do miss the four seasons. I'm actually missing winter and snow at Christmas time. Went through two Christmases there and started to say, it's not a big deal to be at Christmas when there's no snow on the ground. So I went back east and hit New York and got on the ground running pretty quickly, actually. Got to stay with friends from my college days, and I was allowed to start doing voiceovers almost immediately as a guy making commercials in his mom's spare bedroom hired me for $25 a pop to do New York City voiceover work. So suddenly I was on the air in New York City, the number one place to be on the air, if there was such a place. And eventually, with my job as a producer, I was all over the dial. You really could not escape my voice work. If you were watching radio or TV, watching radio. If you were hearing radio or watching TV, I was all over it. And it was thrilling. And you always have the thrill. It never goes away. The thrill of being the one they picked. They chose me to do this. I'm honored. I'm flattered. I'm successful. And I love being successful. And that's the feeling that a voice artist gets when he lands any voiceover job. I assure you of that. Every voiceover talent in the world, I don't care what country, is delighted personally, very intimately, when they're chosen to be the voice. It's an honor, it's a privilege, and we know it. And they could have picked anybody else. So you learn that this is not this is not unearned. I worked hard for it. I went to thousands of auditions, I'm sure, and I've tried out and tried out and tried out and been turned down. But every now and then, when they say you're the one we want, it's a thrill. It never stops being a thrill. That's my thought on being a voice artist. It's a great line of work, except it's changing now because of AI, of course. The low-hanging fruit is gone. Those simple little jobs you might have gotten 5 years ago, narrating a simple YouTube video about how to build a backyard deck. Now, unfortunately, AI has that job of narrating that video. And so I have seen in my lifetime, I've seen the end of the easy voiceover gigs, of the ones that anybody with a half decent voice in a good home studio could get. Now they're being scarfed up by AI. I hate to see it, and I'm glad that Mel Blanc did not see this happen because he would have hated it. He was a strong union supporter, by the way, and he got cheated in his career. That's in my book too. Cheated out of 30 years worth of residuals on TV. Pretty big deal. But the fact of the matter is, Mel would have just hated, would have despised AI voice work. He would have thought it was the end of the world as we knew it. And kind of it is. Actually, a lot of the simple jobs just are taken by AI now and don't even bother to compete. They want to be able to type it and hear it. So that's about that. I mean, it's really a problem in Hollywood, too. It's causing a lot of headaches in Hollywood that actors are being cloned to the extent that their faces are being cloned and so forth. And how do you protect yourself against that? It's a very big deal in Hollywood right now, this business of AI. So I've lived long enough to see that occur. What's next? Oh my God, I don't think I want to know. Seriously, I don't think I want to know. Any more questions there, Robert?
Yeah, boy. And we're kind of living in some pretty because we were just kind of talking about earlier with like technology and how it's
Yeah,
just been advancing and everything. So,
yeah,
yeah, I just don't really want to know what's going to happen in the foreseeable future. But to flip it on something that's a little more positive, coaching. Just share about, some of your recent coaching stuff because I know you've been acting, you've been working with,
yeah.
some of the greats of Hollywood. So, what is something that you really take away the most out of from coaching a new generation of like actors, students, so on and so forth? And yeah, just if you learned something as much from them, like
Yes,
from all the stuff that you
I learned from them.
everybody, yeah,
I'm
just
glad you
talk
asked
about it.
that. I do have some thoughts about that. First of all, I became a better director when I started coaching people more often. At first, it was the occasional one a month or two a month voiceover job that I was coaching somebody through. Until a young lady named Catherine Landher, who is still a dear friend, said, I'm trying to be an actress, but I'd like to do voiceovers too. Would you teach me? This was in the 80s, the first person to ask me that. Well, I had done a lot of work by that time, and I kind of had an idea of what to tell her. But she was a New York-based young actress, beautiful as could be. And so I said, well, if you'll muddle through it with me, I haven't trained to be a teacher, but I'll try. It was a joy. I found out right away to be thinking about other people's success. I think I mentioned that already. To not be thinking about what am I doing for me, but what am I doing for this young lady or this young guy who's trying to make it? Well, I've been down this road. As they say, this isn't my first rodeo. And I can tell them what to expect, how to act at an audition, what their demo tape ought to be like, what they ought to say at an audition, what's the right word to mention to somebody when you're sitting in front of a person who has the power to hire or let you go. Um, it was a very informative thing to find a greater lexicon to use when trying to describe the reading I wanted. I found that directing was a matter of communicating better than most people communicate. To be a great director, you have to have a real way with words. I'm Irish, so I was kind of born with the gift of gab, as you might have noticed. And the idea of finding the right word to tell the person what you want from them as a voice performer, it increased my vocabulary as I looked for that one word I could say, do it this way. And you can't just say, try it again, try it again. You have to tell them, change this or change that. So it made me a much better director right away as I took on the first few students, and only a few. I also was proud that I didn't rip them off for the money because I was making a living and I didn't need to live off the backs of actors. That's something that a lot of people try to do, unfortunately, in both New York and LA. So I tried to charge a very reasonable rate. I think my first rate was $30 a lesson, and a lesson could go on for 3 hours for all I cared. I was enjoying it. And then when they got the job, I could ask them, what did you encounter? What can I learn from your experience? And is this a good producer to work for, etc. So as I got into freelancing, I was more free on a day when I didn't have any other assignment to work on. I could book a student, and I would book them, Robert, for 1 hour minimum, and they'd spend 3 or 4 hours with me, and I'd say, this has been great. We're friends. And that's what I got out of the most. My students often became my very dearest friends. And I'm proud to say that. I'm delighted to say that because I cared about their future and they knew it. I cared. Am I wasting my time here? Am I wasting your money? Or do you have a future in this? I'm also proud that I turned down people who I knew would never get anywhere because they read poorly or they didn't really have good voices in any sense. They couldn't even do a wacky cartoon character. So I turned away people. I don't know that many acting teachers do that. But I told my wife, look, I'm a good person, and I'm never going to dishonor you and your name by being a low life crook, teaching just for the money. I do it because I have a passion for this business and I want to help other people get into it. I still feel that way. And, there's, I still will accept one or two more students than the two that I currently have because they don't work with me every week at this point. But I get great joy out of working with these two people. Their names are John and Valerie, and they have both become dear friends of mine who I really care about. And for a good teacher, that's the reward. If you had a favorite teacher in school, and as an adult, you came back to the school and said, Mr. Neff, your art class was the most fun I ever had in school, in grade school. Mr. Leo Neff, you're the nicest teacher I ever had. And I remember when you caught me reading a Mad magazine and said, there are great artists there. Well, you were the art teacher and you praised their artwork. Instead of taking the magazine from me, you said, you got good taste. you know, so teachers like that, they reside with you the rest of your lifetime. And that's why I was happy to just mention his name, a dear man. Um, it was important to me as a teacher to assure these people that I was doing my very best to advance their career, that anything and everything I had learned was now theirs, if I could pass that along. The teachers who don't have that feeling, who want to keep the job for themselves, if they hear, a guy with a similar voice to mine, he's welcome to that job. Not every teacher feels that way because, if I'm looking out for me in my next gig, that doesn't work. If I'm covetous of their success, that doesn't work. I felt I really liked getting to the point where I wasn't competing aggressively anymore and I could just teach and not do much of anything else. Because then I could really say, I'm living through you. I'm living vicariously through you as a student. Because of your success, I feel better about myself. That's a nice point to reach in a person's life. And now I understand why Mel got so much out of teaching, which he did for a year, and why Dawes Butler was such a beloved teacher as a voiceover coach to Nancy Cartwright. These people didn't do it for the money. They both had good incomes. They did it because they loved to pass on their knowledge. And in Mel's case, his classroom of students, he loved being there with them because he could finally get to know his fans one on one. It was the best opportunity for him to become close friends after a matter of weeks of getting together with his fans. He couldn't do that. If somebody came up to him for an autograph, that's not going to become a lifelong friend. That's a 5-minute encounter. But what he loved beyond anything else, Mel Blanc loved his audience. It was like birthday cake at a party. You looked forward to it and you couldn't get enough and you just, never tired of it. Yeah. Every time he signed an autograph, he got a kick out of it. He was thrilled. And by the way, Mel Blanc volunteered at the Shriners hospitals, especially the burn units of the Shriners hospitals, and went in and entertained these kids for nothing, of course, no charge, and had to be dragged out by his son when closing time came because Mel got such a charge out of giving his talents to make these young kids giggle and laugh when their lives were so awful, when their lives were so terrible. This is the greatest thing people need to know about Mel, and it's in my book, that he gave so generously of his time, entertaining children as all his characters, live in real time, with these children in the Shriners hospitals. And that's why I say to people, if you want to honor Mel, give to those hospitals. So, Mel Blanc knew he'd been given a gift of a renewed life when he survived a terrible car crash in 1961. And he said, I got to pay God back for this. I've been given a second lease on life, and I love my life. So I got to do something to give back. And that's what he chose to do. As a Shriner, as a Mason, in fact, he was eager to go to the hospitals and make these kids laugh. Imagine that. Mel Blanc. You couldn't pay him, to do that as a birthday party. You couldn't pay him enough. He says his rate would be too high. But for free, yeah, please let me get back to the hospital today and entertain those kids. That's a great man. And that's why I say I want my legacy to be I worked for this great man. And that's why I'm going to put my audiobook up on YouTube for free. I'm trying to remember the address I made up for contacting me about that. It will be on the video. It will be right there. But I think it was Mel and Me Book 1 at, oh God, I just made it up the other day. Anyway, it will be on the book. It will be on the book. I'm sorry I can't repeat it right now. I don't remember. But it will be there when I publish the book, which will be next month. It will be out next month. So I love the opportunity to praise Mel when I can because I know what a good and decent human being he was and how badly good and decent human beings are needed in the year 2025. We need more decent, wonderful, kind people than we've got. That's for sure. There's just a lot of hatred going on right now in America, and that's awful. So anyway, any other thoughts?
No, just want to give a closing, like my last piece of advice and closing just statements is like, yeah, we really do need more good, kind-hearted people like Chuck, like Mel, Dawes, and so many that have gave so generously of their time for us.
Yes.
And it's just, look, I know things are really bad, really awful right now, but look, the most that you could possibly do is just donate. Just say hi to somebody, give them a hug.
Yeah.
Just one act of kindness
Yes.
just really means so
Yes.
much. You have no
Yes.
idea. And I guess on that note, I just have to thank everybody. Thank you, Chuck, for taking the time to just talk with me for pretty much almost 2 hours now. And I really appreciate just a lot of us being chatterboxes. So what did I really expect? And I guess on that note, thank you all so much for watching the podcast. Be sure to follow Chuck on his socials. So be sure to get the book whenever that comes out. But until then, catch y'all later. See you next time. God bless. And keeping awesome out there. Beat the light in the midst of all the darkness. Shine on. Bye bye.